Hey there, thanks for tuning into Duckbricks. I'm Chris, and on my recent trip to Billund, Denmark, I got a chance to interview the one and only creator of LEGO Ninjago, Tommy Andreasen. And we got a chance to have a meal together, I got a chance to ask him a ton of questions, and in this video, you're going to be able to take a look at our incredible interview with the master of LEGO Ninjago himself. Big shout out to Tommy for taking the time to do this. He definitely did not need to do it, but I honestly just gave a list of people I would love to meet to the LEGO Masters folks, and after we were flown out for the finale, they said they'll see what they could do, and they actually got me a meeting with Tommy, which was so exciting. Now, I do want to showcase something super exciting here because Tommy was actually able to send me home with 2 pieces of original signed artwork for 2023, which are so cool. Obviously, they are now taking up a major part in my collection. So thank you so much to Tommy for the hospitality. We had a really interesting conversation, and honestly, I feel like we could have kept on talking for quite a long time because I had a mental list of maybe around 100 questions, and I'm pretty sure I only got to ask like 6 of them. So I hope to maybe in the future be able to see him at some point again, but without further ado, let's jump right into my interview with creator of LEGO Ninjago, Tommy Andreasen. Hey everyone, thank you so much for being here. I want to introduce you to somebody you all probably know, Tommy Andreasen. Have I pronounced that correctly?
Well, in Danish is a pretty ugly language, so it's Tommy Andreasen.
Andreasen?
Andreasen. You
Andreasen.
like hit the A.
Okay. Do you mind introducing yourself just to give a refresher for some of the projects you've worked on at LEGO and what's your title at LEGO right now?
I believe my title is Senior Creative Manager. I'm not quite sure. I'm not much into those things.
Sure.
I collect my paycheck and I took a sort of a temporary job at LEGO 22 years ago, I think it was. It was like, oh yeah, why don't we try this out? But I didn't expect it would be 22 years. So I started as an art director. I worked on packaging and install materials.
Okay.
Then at a certain point, I started doing TV commercials. And then I just rolled into a bit of product development. Then that became into concepts, stories, and then TV show production. So it's just been a role of things I wasn't qualified to do, but I got to do, and I had no experience in doing. But if anyone asked me, can you do this? I was like, sure. At least I don't know I can't do it.
Exactly.
So I worked on City and Racers and Alpha Team, Orient Expedition.
Oh, wow.
Orient Expedition. But then obviously we started doing our own IPs. Ninjago was the first I was involved with. Then it was Legends of Chima, Nexon Nights, and Hidden Side, and then obviously now I'm doing Dreams full time because that's a pretty big project. And then we have done a hundred other concepts and ideas that are just sitting in a drawer waiting to be brought out there. It was not that it wasn't a great idea, it just wasn't the best at the time. So we go with something else.
That makes sense. I mean, you've really shepherded a lot of the big LEGO original themes, like the Big Bang themes, and I feel like you've got your footprint on so many of what LEGO's doing with original themes, which is really impressive. I love it when LEGO does original IP. Those are my favorite themes that come out of LEGO. Got into LEGO because of Bionicle back in the day, which was kind of the first really major homegrown IP, and then of course transitioned very smoothly over to Ninjago, came out shortly after that Bionicle ended, and then now it feels like we're getting one after another, which is really exciting. And obviously you've worked on almost every single homegrown IP, I guess maybe Monkey Kid.
Monkey Kid I was involved in. I've been doing a bit of Friends early on, but not in terms of story and TV show. But I think it's very important to LEGO to have their own themes so we can sort of control it in a way where we can get our own values in there, and obviously it's then we're sort of proprietor of the creativity in there, whereas when you license a product, obviously you're paying some royalty fees, but also now you are more or less executing on someone else's vision. But with our own stuff, we're in control, and we're mostly paying for all the development and production of the stuff.
That makes total sense. Well, thank you again for being willing to do this. Really appreciate it. I've got, obviously, I think every LEGO fan and every Ninjago fan has thousands of questions for you. And what I wanted to do was really try to condense questions down to a few different formats and focus on some general stuff, learning more about you, kind of what are the favorite things you've worked on, stuff like favorite seasons, favorite themes, favorite story arcs, and stuff like that, if you happen to have any in mind. And then I do have some more specific Ninjago lore questions, of course, which I know that you're not going to be the canon authority, but it's just, I'm curious what's kind of going on, and that could be canon in your head and whatnot, which a lot of people love to hear, and not just Ninjago as well, but would love to hear a lot of stuff about Chima and Nexon Nights, and of course Dreams, what you can say about what's going on right now. So I guess we can get into things.
Absolutely.
Okay. So I think the first question that I had that I was really curious is that obviously you've worked on Ninjago for pretty much all of its entire run up until Crystallized, and now you're working on Dreams, but Dragons Rising is really the first, I guess, sort of thing or media to come out of Ninjago that you've had no involvement in, right? Or almost little to no involvement?
Absolutely, and it was a bit of a choice. Both, I was working with Ninjago and developing on Dreams at the same time. And it was obvious that when we really got into production on Dreams, it would be a major thing. Lots of stuff. We have 20 episodes a year, and we have all that online short form content, so it would just be too much. So it was just a very natural thing. And then there was this idea about, okay, Ninjago needs to be refreshed. So it just felt like, oh, this is probably a great exit point.
Makes sense.
Also, I had ideas for Ninjago, and I did say, hey, I could do this for another 10 years.
I'm sure.
But I think it was about time that I sort of let someone else work on it.
Sure.
So it was sort of a bit of a negotiation. Hey, can I sort of finish off the story to some extent, getting the characters to a place where I would be comfortable leaving them if I were never to engage with them again. So
Makes
it's
sense.
like why it has this happy ending.
Absolutely.
And then obviously I've been working with Doug and Kevin in the past, so it was like, okay, it's in good hands.
Very nice, and it clearly is. I'm loving Dragons Rising.
And there were some really bold ideas that I was very skeptical of, because I've been engaging with the Ninjago fan community, and I would say there's really appreciation for new, but sometimes they're very wary of being, it's different.
Always change.
But I think definitely with Dragon Rising, they seem to have just hit the right level of both new and different, because obviously getting rid of the ninja to some extent is a very bold call, but I was very happy and surprised to see how that was received.
And it's really working. I'm not going to ask you too many questions on that because of course you're not involved, but I do have to ask, have you seen Dragons Rising up to the point that it's been released, and what are your thoughts so far on it?
I will admit I haven't.
Okay.
I've sort of said to myself, I need a little break on Ninjago.
Totally get it.
It's not that I'm not gonna watch it. It was just like, okay, let's try to clear the plate a bit. And then eventually I'll get around to it, but not for now. I've seen the trailers. I do still follow the Ninjago Twitter a bit.
Nice.
But I mostly try to say, hey,
stepping back.
Father has left the building. Now we let the new fathers play, but obviously I will be taking an interest in it because I worked on it for 13 years or something like that. It has majorly informed the course of my life over many years.
Wow.
And as I say, I probably spent more time with Ninjago than I have with my own kids.
I think I remember you saying that in the TTV interview.
At least in the early days, because you go to work, you work 8 hours, and then put the kids to bed, and then you work another 4 hours. So it's been hectic sometimes.
Well, we can clearly see that so much love and effort was put into it, and we're also thankful for everything you did for Ninjago. Really quick, Robert, do you mind just periodically checking that we are recording?
Yeah.
Thank you. But I guess speaking of, you had mentioned, I know you mentioned this during the interview for the 10 years of Ninjago, that the theme needs to reinvent itself every few years or so. I think you had mentioned 3 or 4 years.
Yeah.
And I'm curious what led to that idea or concept of reinventing Ninjago, or almost soft rebooting it in a way every few years. Because I know for obviously the longest time we had the first line of Ninjago, then Ninjago rebooted, but then there was quite a long span of like Tournament of Elements and then Possession and Skybound and Hands of Time, where it was just continuing with the story for years until we had a bit of a soft reboot, so to speak. So what kind of led to the decision of wanting to reinvent Ninjago every few years?
Well, it is new. Obviously, there's fans that stick around, and some fans are getting older.
Oh yeah.
But we really we need to make sure that it's accessible to newcomers, and that's why the lore is extremely important in Ninjago, and it should never be contradicted and stuff like that. But it also needs to be taken back to a point once in a while where this is a good place to start if you're a completely newcomer. And Dragons Rising obviously is a good example of that. I think also Sons of Garmadon was one of those times. Yes. So we want to honor what we've created, but also make sure we need to keep reminding ourselves that we are making this for children.
Right.
It's great that teenagers and people who are getting beyond still like it, and I think that talks to the quality of the show.
Oh yeah.
And all the effort that's put into it. But first and foremost, we need to make sure that kids will love it.
That makes total sense. I guess speaking of you stepping back from Ninjago and kind of focusing on other things, I do have to ask, there are a couple of ongoing online stories that you were working on, Way of the Departed and Splinter in the Blind Man's Eye. Will we ever potentially see those stories finished at any point? And if not, can you share any details as to where those stories might have been going?
They're pretty great. As I said, I've sort of said, okay, no more Ninjago for me for a little while. That doesn't mean that I'm actually not working on those projects.
Okay.
I think I have most of Way of the Departed is actually written.
Really? Okay.
But I sort of said, okay, the next time I release it, I want to make sure that I can do it periodically and don't take a break. So there's another 10 chapters of that.
Wow.
Maybe it will be 12 or something like that. And there's some really good twists and surprises in there. And that was just always the challenge, because writing for TV is interesting.
Yeah.
Obviously, I'm not really a writer. I'm more a producer, but I have my hands extremely dirty in the stories.
Sure.
But I wanted to try and write something that was a little unfit for TV.
Yeah.
Both in terms of sometimes you're reading a chapter in either of those books and you don't actually know whose point of view it is.
That's really cool.
And then you get to a point where, this is Ronan.
It's Ronan, yeah. It's like,
so the idea that, this is super confusing, I don't get it, but I am picking up information, and then there's a reveal of what it actually is. That was just interesting to me, and something you can't really do on TV.
Exactly.
But I enjoy going back to my documents every once in a while and start writing on that, and also the sort of the plans and the reveals in Splinter and the Blind Man's Eyes are really, really, really weird and out there.
It's already so crazy what you've done with the Cloud Kingdom and all of that. So I'm so excited to maybe one day at some point in the future see what you've got cooking there.
Yeah, and also when I'm done, I want to make sure that I do what I call cliff notes, or a appendix in the end that explains all references in there. And then I want to probably make some printed copies.
Oh my goodness, I'm so excited. Okay, well, thank you so much for answering that. Obviously a lot of excitement around those stories being published at some point, so I cannot wait, no matter how long it takes. I guess shifting focuses a little bit, I did want to talk to you a little bit about some of the other things you've worked on as well. Obviously, Legend of Chima and Nexon Nights, and especially for Nexon Nights, I'm curious if there's anything that you can share about where that story was going to end up. I know you've posted some concept art of the different concepts of how those characters that we saw in the final wave of sets would be, but we never really got an idea of what was going on with Clay's mother and where that storyline was going. And unfortunately, since it got cut short, I'm curious if you are willing to share anything about what that final year of Nexon Nights might have looked like.
Well, the core idea was that Monstrox, the Book of Monsters, would be digitized. So now it was becoming really, really high tech.
Right.
And then obviously Clay was getting to this sort of paladin mode where he was part knight, part magician, but also
Yes.
not really understanding his abilities. So he would seek out the remnants of the Wizards' Council to kind of get some closure of what happened with Ruina, his mother, and maybe see a way to redeem her in some way. And we also learned from the book in Knights Academy that Fletcher, what was his name?
It was Fletcher and Izzy.
Yeah, or Dizzy. Yeah,
Something like
Fletcher
that.
was
Yeah.
also Ruin's brother, son. So they would go on a quest together because he would sort of leave the Nexon Nights because now he wants to find out who he is. But what happens in his absence is that Monstrux he awakens and cyberfies these vampires that think that Murloc is bad. So that would be the new antagonist, was cyber vampires.
Right.
And the idea was that they could sort of bite and infect the systems.
Okay.
So it would be very much about Monstrux takeover of Nighton and the whole kingdom, and then our Nexon Nights would sort of be rebels on the run that would have
really
to
cool.
fight back.
Man.
Also, King Halbert would be sort of trapped in his mech. Because now the mech was taken over by Monstrux, so he would be doing evil things.
Oh, that would be a funny concept of him sitting in there while the mechs attack.
So it would actually, in essence, it would be the story about Clay becoming a wizard and Maisie becoming the queen of the kingdom, because she now has to step up, which was what she never wanted to do. She wanted to be a knight, but now she actually has to be the queen in her father's absence.
That is really cool. So you think that had Nexon Nights had fully concluded, we would see Macy as the queen, Clay as maybe like the magician of the kingdom, and that's kind of where their storylines were going to end up.
That was the end game with it.
Okay.
And I actually just found we have the 10 treatments for the first 10 episodes. We never got around to finishing the other. Also, Jestro would have an interesting arc because he was now sort of forced to do community service.
Yes.
But as it turns out, he's very capable in computer tech. He didn't know that. So now finally he finds out what he's good at.
Okay.
It's not being funny, it's not being evil, he is a really good computer tech.
Oh my goodness.
And then he helps Ava Prentice to program an avatar of herself into the system. So now she's in there, Murloc is in there, and now they're sort of running infiltration inside the computers to stop Monstrux.
Cool.
There's a whole lot of ideas in there. And I have shared some of them. I've shared some drawings.
I've seen,
and Nexon Night was thought as a 3-year thing.
Makes sense.
That's how we always did it back in the day.
Yeah.
But now, obviously, we want to see what happened with Ninjago.
Right.
If people want it, let's keep giving it.
So speaking of how themes, kind of the ideation between themes has shifted over from a set 3-year arc over to something that's a little bit more organic, I really wanted to talk to you about Lego Dreams, which is really the newest theme that you're working on. In terms of Lego Dreams, I know you mentioned you've been working on it for years now.
Yeah.
Is Dreams something that you can see continuing into perpetuity? Do you have a certain number of year arc in mind, and then you could do maybe a different arc after that? Or what does the development process look like in terms of coming up with new ideas for that, keeping the story fresh, but also having maybe some sort of an end game for where the story might be going?
We're trying not to think too far ahead. Okay. Because we want to see, how is it received, how are people responding to it.
Sure.
But I think it's true to say we're always chasing this Ninjago thing where it's like, there's so many ideas and you can do so many things with it. And specifically for Dreams, I think you can just see the potential in there, because if you can dream it, you can do it. And It's sort of a perfect crossover mash-up theme where it's like, if we don't want to do pirates, we can do it in Dreams. So
there you go.
I don't think there's any end to the possibilities on that. So it just depends on and the way the play experience can evolve, because obviously we're trying to sort of take steps to get that into the mindset of the viewer that you need to apply yourself a little here. You need to build this far, but then do this and that.
Right.
But also in the coming seasons, like, okay, then how do we evolve that message into, hey, apply yourself even more. Now don't do this and that, but do this, and then just think out of the box and apply stuff to it. So I think both in terms of the Lego message in there about creativity, and also the endless opportunities that are in there, I hope this has a very long life.
Same here.
Also, we are for the second year we are introducing some new main characters as well.
So that's really exciting.
We want to make sure that this really evolves and becomes more and more interesting.
Okay. So speaking of course, all these original Lego themes, there was a book that came out a while back. It was like The Secret Life of Lego Bricks, and inside it mentioned that a lot of the early concepts for Legend of Chima actually came from animal villains for Ninjago, at least like in terms of the development process. What I'm kind of curious about is that, are there any other examples of themes feeding into other themes, or maybe ideas made for one theme that were used for something else? Like, was there ever any concept that you wanted to use for Ninjago, but ended up using it for Chima or Nexon Nights, or vice versa? I'm curious about like how that whole development process works in terms of all the original themes.
I mean, one of the reasons we're sometimes reluctant to tell about stuff we didn't do is everything gets repurposed in some way. Whether it's just something you have rolling in the back of your mind, or if it is like, oh, this is a good story direction and a good plot twist. We might not do it here, but we can do it over here. As for concrete examples, I am blanking out a bit right now, but I'll keep cranking at it. Maybe I can dig up an example.
So I guess going back to Ninjago, obviously Crystallized was the big finale of Ninjago as a whole, kind of at least up to the point, bring the characters to the arc that you wanted to, as you said, leave the characters in a happy place for somebody to start fresh and do whatever they wanted with the characters. I'm curious that, I think, obviously, as you know, I mean, Crystallized has a lot of ups and downs, and I think fan reaction to it has definitely been a little bit interesting and bumpy, maybe mixed, I would say. And I definitely know that, I mean, Crystallized, I loved a lot of things about it, and I definitely had a lot of questions and thoughts about other things it did. And I'm curious, do you have any, I guess, response to how fans reacted to Crystallized? And if there's anything that you would like to say, I guess, to maybe address some of the fan conceptions on Crystallized, maybe are there any misconceptions out there that maybe people aren't understanding about the development? Maybe if we could take the chance to just chat about that, if you have anything you wanted to say about the development of that season.
Well, I absolutely wanted to tie up the whole thing as best as we could with bringing characters sort of full circle to a sort of happy place. You might say a bit of a status quo, actually. So if the people continuing after Crystallized wanted to say, hey, we're basically back to where we started. This is a good entry point. The characters are more developed, obviously, than they were in season 1.
Of course.
But they're at a place where, they need to get their powers back. There was different ways of doing that, and there were even ideas on how would the end game of Crystallized inform Dragon's Rising?
Of course.
But obviously, then now again you're starting to tie it together. Now it's more of a continuation and less of a starting point.
Right.
Because obviously it would have been relatively easy to rewrite the ending. So, what happens with the merge is a result of the destruction of the Overlord. You can easily do that.
But you want a fresh jumping off point.
So it's a lot less complicated to start on. So in Dragon's Rising, it's obviously there's this world that has a lot of richness and lore to it, but that's all undone, and now you're getting to re-experience it through the eyes of a more humble character.
That makes sense.
I still absolutely love Crystallized. I have very few regrets in it.
That's really good.
I think it was also interesting because there were a few polls that came out on Twitter I saw when Crystallized had concluded. I think Tenor Fishes did one.
I remember seeing.
Where it was like, there's 5 different ones, and looking at the numbers there, it's like, I guess we're 92% certified fresh.
If you look, it's just, I think there's a very vocal aspect of the fan community that didn't like it, but I think on the whole it was, as you said, it left the characters in the perfect happy spot to continue. That was really great.
And what I understand is if you're watching Ninjago as a more mature person, it's a little hard to understand that the ending was that, in quotes, naive, you know. But that's why I felt like, okay, this is what I would like as a 9-year-old boy to see.
Fair
so
enough.
It's also always about going back and take this perspective.
It's for the kids.
It's for the kids. Obviously, we were riffing on a lot of stuff in Crystallized with bringing back old characters, but that was sort of just for fun and something I felt like, oh, maybe fans of Ninjago would like to see these characters one last time, because obviously with Dragons Rising it was clear that we're gonna clear the table somehow. I don't know if Python's ever gonna show up again.
I hope he does. I love Python.
I don't know, I'm not involved,
Yes.
but so it was sort of important to me that, okay, we get to hang out with Python.
That's nice.
At least one last time, if that's the case.
Such good voice acting. I love his voice. It's just so entertaining every time he speaks. But, I guess another kind of burning question that I've always had, and I know a lot of people have always had, kind of going back to season 11, season 12. I don't know if this is more of a question about set stuff, show stuff, and I'm actually very curious because we don't really know a ton about it, but obviously Zayn as a character didn't really feature that much in Prime Empire outside of the very, very funny detective episode. I love that episode so much. But we have seen concepts floating around of a Digi-Zayn minifigure, and at some point LEGO at least maybe was considering putting him in Prime Empire, and I'm curious if there was anything story-wise that changed the decision not to incorporate Zayn into Prime Empire. Was there something about the ending of season 11 with where he was left off as the Ice Emperor that influenced the decision to not incorporate him really strongly into the sets as kind of part of the main storyline and the main crew? Always been so curious about what happened.
Yeah, I think the fact is really boring actually.
No, I'd love to hear it.
Because there wasn't. There's sometimes there is a discrepancy between toys and show, because sometimes some things it works well in the show, but doesn't work well as a toy, and then vice versa. And for instance, with Zayn digital figure, we just didn't feel it fit in the show, and it would be better to have something on the outside of the video game, because the show itself could very much just become a video game thing. But we wanted to make sure that there was something that we're still remembering Ninjago here. Also, for instance, in Master of the Mountain, Cole gets these amazing earth powers, but there were still some other sets coming out with, I think, Kai.
Burst Kai and Burst Lloyd, which
obviously great toys, but if we were to incorporate that in the story, it becomes less of a Cole thing. So that's more like, it's a could be canon thing that can happen. And I think we did have the idea that, there's the Temple of Earth deep in the mountain. There's gonna be a Temple of Fire in a volcano, and a Temple of Lightning somewhere in the sky and stuff like that. So everyone would be able to go on this journey and do what Cole did and connect more with their elemental powers in a way. But there's always ideas like that are, we make a note of it, and then maybe we use it or maybe we don't use it.
Totally makes sense. I guess another question I've had about season 11, there was a set that was going to come out, the Monastery of Ice, and I'm curious about the story process of developing that NetherRealm storyline. Do we need to pause for a second? Okay. Unfortunately, I'll try to be as quick as possible. When developing the NetherRealm storyline, I know that there are some concepts that you would put out about Crag being more of like a shorter character and like kind of a sensei role, and then of course we saw some prototypes of the set, the Monastery of Ice, with some sort of a, we don't know what the name of that character was, and I'm curious if there's anything you can say about that set. And also, I do love how kind of at least the inspiration behind that set is sort of almost incorporated into Splinter in a Blind Man's Eye with like that temple. I was like, that's like the same temple from that canceled set. I actually rebuilt it because of that. I tried to piece it together because Sakota put out the instructions, but I'm curious, like, what was the story behind that?
I'm a little fuzzy on that. Sure. But it was the idea that, hey, we can fit in another SKU into the assortment, another product into the assortment. Maybe I think the idea was just, could we do a special release around Christmas of a set. And then development started on okay, if we're gonna do that, we're just gonna make a set that implies a story but doesn't necessarily have a story.
Interesting.
So that's why some of
wow.
there was a bad guy in there.
Yeah.
There was some skeletons.
Yeah.
But it was more like, oh, this is a bit of a Ninjago greatest hits set in that
Almost like core.
sense. Yeah. You can really go in there and make up your own story with it. So we did a bit of a story. It's like, oh, here's how the logic works.
Interesting.
But then when the set got cancelled, and obviously it's like, oh, we're doing a bigger Ice Temple set.
Yes.
Then that became the thing for what was the season called?
Secrets of the Forbidden Ninjutsu?
That's
yes.
the one.
And it was like maybe like fire and ice at one point, and then there was like too much Game of Thrones.
But I always had the idea that okay, so this is an ice temple on top of a mountain. Oh, and there was just this faceless bad guy in there. Okay, that could be Fenwick, because I'm always sort of trying to. And that's then how the idea of the story got repurposed. And there were skeletons down there. Obviously, he was doing bad things. And, he's been killing some people. But then what's the logic? And that's how
you incorporated it in.
Linda came to be, as far as it has gotten so far.
That's really cool. Thank you. All right, so now that I think we're kind of nearing the end of this, again, thank you so much for being willing to do this. I wanted to kind of ask you some lightning round questions that are just sort of for fun, to learn more about what kinds of things do you like with the world of LEGO, with what you've worked on, what you haven't worked on. Starting off with, what is your favorite LEGO theme that you have had no influence on whatsoever, have never touched? Because I know you've had an impact on a lot, so I'm curious, is there one that you can appreciate from the outside that you have no connection to?
Well, Ultra Agents and Space Police. I think I like science fiction, and also I think definitely for Ultra Agents, I worked on the very, very, very early stages of that. Just as a concept, it was called Power Man or something like that back then.
Really? Oh, that's
or Robo Man or something.
Okay.
It was more of a superhero theme, but some of the villains that then made it into Ultra Agents were sort of based on that.
That's so interesting.
So it was sort of a special force versus dangerous superpowered mutants.
Okay.
But just looking at Space Police and Ultra Agents, I think I can just see there's a story in there that this would make for a great TV show.
Yes.
And I think they have the potential, as Ninjago and other ones do, if they would have gotten that kind of support.
That's really cool. Okay. We did get those Space Police 3 animations, which I loved as a kid. I don't know if you the stop action ones. Oh my god, that like fleshed out the story a little bit of Space Police. I just watched those over and over again, so I totally get where you're coming from. I guess the next question is, in terms of Ninjago, is there a favorite season or story arc that really speaks to you, maybe other than Crystallized? Because I know Crystallized is really special as the big ending, so to speak. So other than that, is there a favorite season or story arc that you really love?
I really enjoyed working on Tournament of Elements, because that was just like completely opening up the thing again with elemental masters. Obviously then we get into realms and stuff like that. So that's where Ninjago sort of went from being sort of a quaint little thing in my mind to being like, whoa, this can be anything. Very much enjoyed Sons of Garmadon and Hunters, because that was a very intense process. And this was also the point where I was like fully back on Ninjago, because for a lot of several years I wasn't that involved in the actual production.
I don't think you were that super involved.
I was running the script writing process and the story with the Hagemans, but I had nothing to do with the core concept.
I see.
I was busy on Chima and I guess developing Nexon Nights at that time. Chima was over probably. But no, when we started up on Sons of Garmadon, I was in all aspects of the production again. With
one of my favorite seasons, maybe my favorite. I flip flop back and forth. So, okay, shifting gears a bit. Legends of Chima. You've talked a little bit about a planned movie that never came to be. I think it was Time for Heroes or something like that. Mm-hmm. What can you tell us about what that movie was supposed to be, maybe where it was supposed to take place in the Chima storyline, and maybe ultimately why did that not actually happen?
Well, I guess well, we have a full script. It's just the first draft, and it would have happened after the end of season 2, the Fire and Ice one.
Oh, after the end of season. Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting.
So there's you after that you get to the conclusion of Legends of Chima.
Yes.
But there was a story there that would have been the movie where Cracker stumbles upon the passage of time, which is under the Forever Rock.
Yes, I saw you were.
He actually wanders back into the future. The past 10,000 years, which is and ends up in the war between the Phoenix and the Ice Hunters.
Oh.
They're not Ice Hunters at that point.
Right.
But then the whole crew have to follow him back. So it was just like a big story of how they get involved in that conflict.
Really?
And then they take sides. It's they know they can't mess up the timeline as well. So it was a bit of a time travel story. The outcome of it would have been there was only 2 changes that were made.
Yeah.
The beavers were huge back in the day. They became very small because
so funny.
And they were huge and destructive. So now the change would they were small and they fixed everything. And then
so
it would
funny.
be revealed because of their heroics back in the day, siding with the Phoenix. The animals carved into Mount Kavor are actually portraits of our heroes. That was sort of the end of the movie where you realize that.
Wow.
Well, I think give me the chills thinking about it.
Oh my goodness! Yeah, like I mean, I was always wondering why certain animals were represented there and not the other ones. That is so cool.
Yeah, we have the 8 main tribes there, and those were the 8, our main crew that went back in time.
Wow, that's really cool.
Yeah. I hear some fans have the script and they may be trying to recreate the story.
I heard about that as well. I am watching that with great interest.
Yeah,
I'm very.
I would like to see it. I always thought like, if I get the time one day, I'm gonna turn it into a comic book. But that's probably never gonna happen anymore.
Well, I'm really excited to see if anything comes of that. I think I'm actually in contact with the Chima channel. I think he mentioned that he was working on that, so I'm very excited to see if that ever comes to light. All right, so I guess moving onwards to any of the Big Bang themes you worked on, Ninjago, Chima, and Nexon Nights. For each of those 3, I guess I would say, keeping it to those 3, maybe Hidden Side as well. Do you have a favorite Lego set that came from each of those 3 or 4 themes? If you could name a favorite Lego set.
It would probably have to be the Fortress, just
That's
because that was such a darling of mine.
Yeah.
I loved the whole idea, I think Alex Boudon, who's a great designer, I think he came up with the original idea, but it was just like, oh my god, a rolling high-tech castle, it's so great, it's such a good idea, and I just fell in love with that idea, and I will claim that I came up with the name, the Fortress,
Nice.
which I thought was like great. It's like a fort, it's a fortress, it's a fortress. It has tracks.
So nice. Oh, tracks.
Like Fortress. It just worked so well, and
nice.
we obviously make sure we had very good use of that in the show as well, because it's just a wonderful toy.
So iconic.
But I generally don't have many Lego toys at home. I have the Bounty from the movie, the Ninjago movie, just because it's beautiful.
Yeah.
And obviously we got to make good use of that in the show as well.
Yes.
From starting from Sons of Garmadon.
Okay. Final question, definitely did want to ask this one, is with regards to Ninjago. You have stated that you will never do anything, or even at least when you were working on it, we would never see Ninjago in space because it's too close to Star Wars and your love for Star Wars. Was there ever a time, I know that like maybe there were some rumblings of an idea for season 4 to be a space-themed season. Is there any truth to those? Like, was there ever a point where Ninjago space was considered, but we decided not to do it? And is that why we got the space episode in Rebooted? What can you tell us about that?
I remember having had very vivid conversation, me siding against it, but I think that was more with the design team at the time, rather than there was an actual idea or the Hageman. Actually, I've heard that they say that I don't know if it's true that they had an idea for Ninjago.
I think that was where I was remembering.
But I think when we got to the sort of the idea of the realms, it's just like, why would you need space
when
you can open up a completely new location? So you don't need to be a science fiction story. Also, I guess one of the things I've always wanted to do with Ninjago was like to really bring it back to its roots, because when you saw the first season was okay, it is Ninjago. It's a world that is both high tech, but it also has this very
rural side, like the villages.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So I thought like, if there was ever a way to bring it back to that, I think that would be very, very interesting. And one of my ideas for End of Crystallized is with the destruction of the Overlord would sort of make an EMP that would
get rid of Ninjago City,
destroy all technology. It's still there, it doesn't work.
Okay.
So we're back to the good old ways, which I think would also have been an interesting way to reboot Ninjago.
Okay, well, and with that, thank you again so much for taking the time to do this. Really, really appreciate it. I know you're so busy with so many things, but this really means a lot. Before we wrap up here, I do have to ask, would you be willing to sign a couple of Ninjago items?
Sure.
Thank you so much. Well, actually, I've brought the first ones here. We've got a sealed Ninjago spinner set, which I actually found by accident. I was at a Lego convention, and I have to ask you to sign this. And I did not get a black. Well, I think the silver one might be good enough. And of course, I had to bring some Shima posters as well. And, I mean, I tried to cover everything and be as prepared as I could be to.
You're embarrassing me.
And with these from the Lego campus, I'm actually going to give these out to fans of Ninjago and like other channels and whatnot to distribute. So it would really mean a lot if you would be willing to sign those.
Yeah, that's my drawing actually.
Yeah, I know. I thought, of course, that's so perfect.
The interesting thing, it wasn't made for any Ninjago project. This is just one I did on my own time.
Huh.
But somehow it made it in there.
Yeah. Thank you so much for doing this.
Well, I brought something for you guys as well. You can fight over who gets what. This is for you.
Oh, thank you so much. Oh my good.
Calm down, man.
What is that?
Thank you so much. This means.
Billund is the second-hand shop mecca of the world, so it's very easy to get cheap frames. So I always stuff my stuff drawings in frames.
Thank you so much.
Most welcome.
I am going to put these up. My goal one day is to open up a Lego museum, so it would really be amazing to be able to have these signed pieces in my museum, and I really this means so much. Thank you for doing this.
Well, thank you, and I'll make sure to sign all this.
Thank you so much.
Peace.
Alright, and with that, we have summed up my interview with Tommy A, creator of LEGO Ninjago. Let me know down in the comments below, what did you think of his answers, and what would you have asked him if you were in my place? I know I certainly had a lot of questions I was wanting to ask him, but unfortunately, we only had limited time, but he was very kind enough to actually take some time to have breakfast with us at his favorite restaurant for breakfast, which was really cool, going to his favorite place to eat in Billund, Denmark. This was such a surreal experience, and thank you to him and also to the LEGO Skill Masters team for making this possible. This was not really even part of the prize, but it was kind of just an additional request that I was like, hey, you know, if he's free, I would love to meet him, and they made it happen. So this was so cool, and don't worry, because so many more details of my incredible build and trip will be coming out over the next few weeks. I hope you enjoyed this video. Thanks for tuning in, and bye for now.